Okay, so 7a and 7b are dealing with number lines, adding and subtracting positive and negative numbers, and specifically fractions. So we're going to go over some basic integer rules for adding and subtracting positive and negative numbers, specifically fractions. So as we know, we have a couple rules. We have addition and subtraction rules, and then we have multiplication and division rules. For addition and subtraction, we add and subtract negative and positive numbers a few different ways. I'm going to give you a few examples. The first example, 4 plus negative 2, can be more easily written 4 minus 2. And this looks more familiar to the students, so they would know that 4 minus 2 equals 2. So again, the rule right here is that we could change this addition sign and this negative sign just simply to a subtraction sign. 4 minus 2 is the same thing as 4 plus negative 2. Right here, when you see two negative signs like this right next to each other, negative 2 minus negative 2, these two negatives change to a positive. So this one would actually be negative 2 plus 2 equals 0. So first rule is that we could change adding negative numbers to subtracting, and the second rule for addition and subtraction is that we could change subtracting negative numbers to addition. So this would simplify our problem. For multiplying and dividing, we know that a positive number times a positive number equals a positive number. We also know that a negative number times a negative number equals a positive number. And lastly, we know that a negative number times a positive number equals a negative number. And because of the commutative property, it doesn't matter which order this goes in. So again, for example, 2 times negative 2 would also equal negative 4. So these are some basic rules for adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing positive and negative numbers. For fractions, what we're dealing with now is we are taking the information we learned, adding, subtracting fractions, and multiplying, dividing fractions, and now we're going to put it on the number line. These will most likely be mixed numbers and proper fractions, and not so much whole numbers. We're practicing number lines with mixed numbers and improper fractions. So for example, a problem that they had on their worksheet maybe was similar to 1/2 plus 2/3. Now we know when we add or subtract fractions we have to get the like denominators. So the easiest way to do this is to multiply these together, and that would give us a common denominator of 6. And then we would need to change both of them to 6. We change this to 6 by multiplying 2 by 3. So what you do the denominator, you have to do the numerator. 1 times 3 equals 3. We would change this to 6 by multiplying the 3 by 2. What you do to the denominator, you have to do the numerator. 2 times 2 equals 4. So now we're dealing with 3/6 plus 4/6. And we know that the denominator would stay the same, and we'd add 3 and 7 to equal 7/6. This is an improper fraction. We change it to a mixed number by dividing. 6 goes into 7 one time. The remainder of 1 comes up, and our denominator moves over. The answer is 1 1/6. So now what we have to do is we have to plug this into our number line, which we'll have to create. So we know that this is a positive number, so it goes to the right of the 0. And we also know that it's not a whole number, it's a mixed number, so it's dealing with whole numbers and fractions. So this is going to go between the positive 1 and positive 2. Now, we want to know more specifically, where does it go between the 1 and the 2. We know that 1/6 isn't yet 1/2, and it's actually closer to 0 than it is to 1/2. So it would be close. 1 1/6 would be much closer to the 1 than it would be the 2. Okay? The next example, again, we're dealing also with negative numbers. That includes fractions as well. So if we did 1/2 plus negative 2/3, again, we're going to use our rule that we learned up here. When we have a plus negative, we could just simply change it to a subtraction sign to keep things a little bit more simple. So this would come to 1/2 minus 2/3. Then again, we'd have to get a common denominator. The common denominator is 6. 2/3 change to 4/6. 1/2 changes to 3/6. Again, same thing we did over here. And now we work the problem. We have 3 minus 4, which would get us a negative number because we have 3 and we subtract 4. So if we want to use the number line to help us with this, and some students still need to do this for a while until they get more comfortable with it, we can use the number line to help us with this. If we're at 3 and we subtract 4, we would move over 4 spaces to the left. Remember, the left is negative. Anything left is negative. Anything right is positive. So we're starting at 3 and we're going to move over 1, 2, 3, 4 spots. So we know our numerator is going to be -1, and our denominator, as always with addition and subtraction, carries over. So our answer is going to be -1/6. Now again, my last step is that I have to plug this into my number line. Now it's a negative answer, so it's going to be left of the 0, and we know that 1/6 is somewhere between 0 and 1, right? It's not a whole and it's not 0, but it's somewhere between that 0 and -1. And again, we know that our 1/6 is closer to 0 than it is to 1. It's not quite a half, and it's closer to 0, so we're going to go ahead and mark -1/6 on our number line right there. Now, again, going back to our multiplication and division with fractions, we're going to do the same thing, but we multiply and divide fractions a little bit differently. So if we have the same problem, we're going to do 1/2 times -2/3. Now the rule is when you multiply a positive times a negative, you're going to get a negative answer. So we multiply across. 1 times -2 is -2 over 2 times 3 is 6. We're going to simplify this because we can divide both of these by 2, and we're going to get -1/3. -1/3, or -1/3, is going to be on the left of the 0, and we know it's going to be between 0 and -1. And we also know that it's close to -1/2, so it's going to be not quite -1/2, it's going to be closer to the 0, between the 0 and -1/2, so that's going to be -1/3.